resolution approving downtown open container area. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Ingebretson, seconded by Vice Mayor Pacheco. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. This is the action item we need in order to enact the open container area for this season, if you will. Council gave some specific direction when we met on this topic in pre-meeting the last time, and so we tried to incorporate that direction into the resolution. And so if the resolution looks appropriate and it captures the directives that you put forward, then I think the resolution should make everything happen for this season.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yes, please.
Councilman Nell.
I just want to go on record publicly. I had several constituents call and say, why are you doing this? Why don't you just open it up? Why do I have to buy a $6 drink from a bar when I can bring my cooler down to David Street Station, save myself a ton of money, and still be able to enjoy the open container? And after speaking to the chief, and the reason this needs to be said is this is an economic development driver for our businesses downtown. This is not a free-for-all drunken brawl where you just bring your cooler and party out and pass out downtown. So this is under the direction of our city and our police department. There will be wristbands and cups that you must use. IDs will be checked. And this is more for driving economic development in our downtown area. So that's the gist of it. That's the reason for it. So that's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else with discussion? Councilman Gamera.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple things. I had reached out to Corey Cosner-Burton and Sheena Hickson over at Mercer Family Resource Center and had them put together just some information from their side of things, because I've worked in prevention before, and so I did have, from a public health prevention standpoint, some concerns about this resolution that we were considering, because I know, for instance, there's good evidence to support the notion that, say, alcohol advertising at community events correlates or affects youth alcohol usage, and that's why you see at a lot of the big, I don't know if CNFR still allows alcohol advertising. They might, but I think they had to axe tobacco advertising, maybe is what it was. But that's why you see some of these industries being cut out of these large community events advertising-wise, because there's evidence to support that. And so I want to make sure that we're balancing the public health prevention perspective with the economic development and kind of individual liberty perspective. And so I had them put together some information for me, and then also give some suggestions that they thought would be good for us to consider. I'm glad to see there's stickers on the cups, because they said wristbands and cups would also be good. I am curious, so with the recent condition that all bartenders must be tips trained, part of that is figuring out when a consumer is at the point of diminishing returns, and that's at the point where alcohol becomes an impediment, more of a detrimental effect, as opposed to having some positive benefits. And so it would be, with people hopping around so much, I wonder, how do we make sure that the people at those point of purchase sites are able to have a good opportunity to tell how intoxicated a person is? And so I don't know. I don't work in that environment, so I don't know if that's something maybe the chief could add to, but that would be a concern of mine, is just those tips trainers being able to tell how intoxicated a person is, if there's anything we can do related to that. And I also wanted to suggest that we dial back from 12 a.m. to 10 p.m. Because I believe the only places open past 10 p.m. in this district are Gaslight and the Office. If Gaslight were to host, any of those concerts at RV Stock-Ups or anything, they're probably going to pull a special permit anyways, and so it would cover street usage around that event. And if that's the only event going on downtown, I don't know if we should really be encouraging or incentivizing people to wander throughout the rest of downtown where nothing else is going on. That to me seems like we're opening a bit of a can of worms. So again, from the public health prevention side of things, I'd love for us to try this out, to come at it in a very strategic, conservative way, and then if we have really great success, maybe we can think about opening it up more, getting a little more liberal with it. But because we don't have much information to go off of last year, I personally would like to play this a little bit safer, especially considering Chief provided some numbers, $87,000 in increased cost. I think we need to take that into consideration as well when we're asking for cuts and all of these other things. You know, is this worth the extra nearly $100,000 in increased police department presence? So those are my concerns and my feedback. Thank you.
Chief?
We try to remember all of those. First of all, when it comes to the tips training, that was, by direction of council. We introduced mandatory tips training. It would be my opinion that nothing would be diminished by having this. If they're actually going to have to walk up, and so they're not going to be sitting at a table. If somebody's upright and you're conversing with them at the counter for a purchase, you've got far better advantages to see whether or not they've had too much already. So I would not estimate that, as long as they're lawfully obtaining their alcohol from one of our vendors, one of our retailers in the downtown area, that's actually a good conducive environment because we'll see them walking, we'll see them coming in and exiting from each of the retailers. I would strongly support 10 p.m. Because just like our grandmothers taught us, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. That's proven true in my law enforcement career. And so that's part of the reason why the expansion of the overtime monies was to account for that extra 2 hours every night. It also increased the shift length, so I was obligated to find breaks and things like that for my officers, and by scaling it back, makes it much more tenable and better logistics. So I would support that, and I think that, was there another question in there that you needed to
Sorry,
respond to?
sometimes I have a habit of just unloading. No, I think I appreciate the comments on the tips training. That's good to know. Yeah, well, and I guess why we have you, Councilman L brought up that this is an economic development. This would be to, it's an economic development driver, but also from the enforcement side of things, in regards to people bringing their own alcohol. I imagine having tips trainers, selling alcohol at point of purchase makes your job a lot easier and stuff, as opposed to people bringing their own alcohol.
Certainly more than people bringing their own.
Okay.
The police department and your police chief would not support an open, bring your stuff and, have a cooler in the back of your truck. I would not support that. It's untenable, it's unpoliceable. It would end up in uses of force. It would end up in a bunch of problems. So, the controls that we have, I think meets our city's, our community's needs. Let's keep this safe and enjoyable. We want our downtown area, especially the David Street Station area, to be a family-oriented area. And so these controls help us to attack this from both. We want it to be successful. We want a thriving downtown community. We want to support all of these things, but we got to find the line in here, and I think right now the lines are appropriately drawn. If you scale it back to 10, it's going to be easier on me.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Pacheco.
Thank you. Yeah, I can get behind 10 o'clock, and I think that probably is a prudent approach. And I think if that also helps the chief feel a little bit more comfortable, I think we can definitely have a more compromise as far as that goes. And I think Kyle's right. There's somebody pull the permit to have an outdoor thing, they're going to be able to have that event and be able to do it. So I think that's a good idea that can benefit. So I'll support the 10 o'clock.
Councilman Now?
Is it in fact true that the other bars that are in this area close at 10 o'clock? That doesn't sound right to me on a Friday and Saturday night. That doesn't sound right to me at all. That's when they make their nut. So I have a really hard time believing that the Branding Iron, backwards, whatever else is down through there closes at 10 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night. So I'm not sure where you got that info.
Just personal experience, I think Gaslight office are open past 10 p.m. I think Amber is as well over at Backwards. I don't believe Branding Iron is. But again, I don't have a ton of, that's based on not.
They close at 10 on Friday and Saturday.
It is?
Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
Yellowstone Garage is the same.
When
The
was
reason I asked
when
is,
the
or brought it up, I guess,
Thursday?
was, and I guess I would ask the chief, one of his concerns was, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock. Well, it doesn't matter if we're outside on the sidewalk or if they're inside the door. There's people out there after 10 o'clock. So I don't know that argument's holding much weight with me
And Backwards is 9:30.
on Friday and Saturdays.
Yep.
Yellowstone
At least that's what's
Garage is
available
10
online.
PM on Friday and Saturday.
Well, there you have it.
So that's my concern, is that if Gaslight and Office are the only facilities or the only establishments open past 10 p.m., we're giving everyone liberty to take those alcoholic drinks potentially all the way from Gaslight all the way down to Backwards when nothing's going on. The rest, that to me I think is opening a can of worms.
I'm with you. I could get behind 10 o'clock and we can always revisit it next year, right?
Yep.
The only time I think you're gonna see something beyond 10 is you may have some events at Davis Street Station will go past 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock.
But then they're
At
permitted,
11
right?
o'clock, then it's done.
Are they permitted then for that area?
Generally, yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, any amendments?
So, would I, alright, I don't have a script or nothing, but I guess I would like to propose that we amend the resolution to end at 10 p.m. as opposed to 12 p.m. or 12 a.m.
Okay. there's a
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Lutz. Any discussion on that? Further? Okay, all in favor of moving it back to 10 p.m., say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay. So back to the original, or amended now. That we need to go to.
Yep, yep, yep,
So,
exactly. Unless
any
there's
further
other-
discussion on the amended, as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
All right. So, do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Councilman Nell, second by Councilman Kathy. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye. Okay. Motion passes. That's all we need on that.
Yes, sir.
Does
Thank
that
you.
have to be 3 times or is that, we're done?
That's it.
That's it.
We're done.
You got it, yep.
So the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn
So
out of
moved.
the special meeting. Moved by Councilman Kathy, second by
Second.
Councilwoman Lutz. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, and now we'll get into our regular work session. Do we have a council follow-up from last week?
I do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else have anything on council follow-up? All right, so move on to Link Drive, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you can see in your exhibit, both on the screen as well as with regard to a handout that's coming around the table here, the area in question that we're discussing this evening is in the western part of our community, at the corner of Magnolia and Link, which is just outside the limits of the city. As it relates to this request, this is part and parcel due to the subject property, who was represented by Mr. Hall tonight, thank you for coming, would like access to city utilities. And with that, typically there are expectations per the ordinance that would be consistent with those kinds of requests, access to utilities. When there is an undeveloped set of infrastructure, if you will, in place, which is the case here. As you can see, Link and Magnolia are not paved, and the access point to the utility, as the inset of your handout indicates, is shy of the property. Mr. Hall here is here, I should say, to represent the developer in question, and would give voice to the request being made, which should be consistent with the letters that you received in your packet over the weekend. I've asked Andrew, however, to give us a primer, if you will, with regard to what the ordinance would typically require in circumstances like this, so that you can see where staff felt a little unauthorized, if you will, to make some of these things happen, in that the ordinances are, we believe, pretty clear with regard to what they typically require. So if I could first turn the time over to Andrew, Mr. Mayor, to walk us through some of that, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor, council, so this is the property that Mr. Hall is representing.
Yep.
And the city limits do something like that. So he is just outside the city limits, and the water line ends right there. Typically, when a property owner immediately adjacent, contiguous to the city limits, comes in and wants city utilities, they're welcome to do so, but the expectation is that they would have to annex immediately into the city limits and extend utilities to and through the development. So typically it would be through Link to Magnolia and then to that property line. And then also bring the streets, adjacent streets up to city standards, curb and gutter, pavement, sidewalks. I don't know if sidewalks would be required in this. I'm not quite sure on the zoning, and street lights. I know I talked to Randy's engineer, Sean, several months ago. And as you can imagine, for one property owner to put that expense, especially to there, is pretty expensive. And even, I think, the estimate that Randy was given to extend the water and the improvements through to Magnolia, just to complete this street, was estimated at $76,000 a week. So, but typically, if they want water and sewer, and they're contiguous to the city limits, they would have to annex and extend the utilities to and through, and bring up the adjacent streets up to 6 standards. Sewer is already looped to this location now, so sewer's not in question on this parcel.
So the question is, with respect to Mr. Hall's request to you, is whether or not those requirements, as Andrew just described, could be somehow waived, given the imbalance that this property owner would have to bear in terms of the overall infrastructure costs relative to his location, to the amount of improvements that would be necessary to make happen. Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, Mr. Hall, do you mind representing what the request is to the council as an alternative consideration?
Sure.
That's all right with you?
Yeah.
Thank you, council, for allowing me to speak today. Mr. Broussard is the owner of 5051 Link Drive. He's owned it since 2009. He's in the process of retiring, and I have the property listed for sale. The defect on the property is he has to haul water. Formerly he was hauling from Mills, now he has to haul from Evansville because Mills discontinued the service. I actually contacted Andrew three or 4 months ago about this issue, and this is a legacy property. The water and sewer that exists there now has been in there for decades, I'm assuming. Sewer, why it was extended down and or west and then south, I have no idea. But Link Drive, curb, gutter, pavement, water, all terminated just shy of his east property boundary. What we're asking for is the ability to be able to extend water and sewer, if necessary, to his building in exchange for his commitment to annex at some point in the future and participate in a global assessment district, which would allow all of those costs to be shared by other property owners adjacent. Magnolia, I mean, for health and safety purposes, at some point in the future, Magnolia connects to CY, and on the north, on its north point, it connects up to, I think it's Indian Paintbrush, or not Indian Paintbrush, Paradise Drive. So there is a looping effect in there, but most of those property owners now, like being out in the county, and they don't like having access to city services, and they don't want to be told what to do. This is a very short accommodation, and we're 30 feet from water right now. So anyway, that's the gist of the request. I understand you have an ordinance, and I understand that you know, sometimes it's hard to get those things waived, but that's my request, and I'm speaking on behalf of the owner. And he's also sorry he wasn't here. He's still a little COVID sensitive, so he's an older gentleman.
Okay, Councilwoman Ingram.
So he's not on a well or septic or anything like
No,
that? What's,
he hauls his water. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, he is on septic, yes.
he's on a septic?
Yes. Yeah,
So-
septic field is located on the west side of his property.
And the well, he just chose not
He
to
has no well.
drill?
He just has the septic
Right,
field over
but
here.
he just chose not to drill a well?
Well, I think there's also some problems to drilling wells, is there not, within certain distance of the city limits?
Right. Existence of city utilities, I think, is what drives that.
Right. So, I mean, he goes from not being a city payer of water to a city payer of water. So, there is that advantage the city would have by allowing him to do this.
Councilman Nell.
Thank you, sir. So I have 3 questions, sir, if I may. The first one would be, why not annex now? You said he may in the future. Well, if he sells his property, he
Well,
doesn't have to do anything.
I don't think he has any objection to annexing now. It's the requirement of annexation of extending Link Drive and then Magnolia down, and him bearing that entire cost by himself. It's 200 and some thousand bucks to do what's required of the annexation ordinance.
Carter, while we're on this subject, because I do have 2 more questions for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Couldn't we allow them to be annexed and yet wait to do the improvements until we have a global market that can be shared in order to do that, rather than just give them city utilities and say you can annex someday and he may or may never? Wouldn't that be an option for us?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, you have identified exactly the rub, because the ordinance does not really anticipate that level of flexibility outside of council saying, in this circumstance, we're going to make that happen. Because basically what Mr. Hall is offering is exactly what you're proposing, if I understand your question correctly, in that those costs would be borne by an LAD that would be created to improve the infrastructure through the area in the way that we would normally expect the annexation to take care of that for us. The difficulty with this is, admittedly, that this is a rather different scenario, because you do have the convergence of 2 unimproved streets, which would ordinarily require a utility that would be run to and through in an area that is not typically the case. And so, without a doubt, you've got some circumstances here that could be considered unique, but the ordinance doesn't really give us that flexibility from a staff level.
Well, and my other questions, which they're more comments, I worry if we were to approve this, I worry more about the other people who we have made by ordinance put inside lots and extend these things. We didn't let them off the hook. Or what are we doing in the future when people want our stuff? And we're going to say, well, wait a minute, you let that guy. We could be opening up a can of worms, which is probably why we have the ordinance in effect. So it's going to be a tough sell for this kid, but I'm just one person.
Yeah.
But I see so many problems with this: prior, future. And he's literally doing this so he could sell the property. So
Sure, absolutely. I mean, no question.
So it's going to be a pretty tough. I'm done. Thank you.
May I speak?
Absolutely.
There was a policy that existed previous to this council and probably several before you, that there were water and sewer agreements that were private water and sewer agreements that the city of Casper allowed for properties that were within a certain distance of the service area. And at some point in the interim, that policy changed. So there is a history in the past of allowing this kind of a situation to occur. Mr. Napier is correct in that this is a unique situation. He would be more than happy to annex, but for the cost of doing so. So, you know, it's a unique situation. I appreciate your comments and I appreciate your position as well. But, you know, I want to point out that this is a unique situation.
Councilwoman Ambretson.
This is a comment for Carter. So, if this is just going to be too cumbersome and too expensive for the city to take on, could it be something considered to allow this gentleman to be able to at least drill a well so he can have water on his property? To me, that would be an easier solution than the rest of it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, the only problem is that we have state statute that we have to contend with as it relates to his proximity to existing water utility and sewer utility. And so I would say that's probably not an option because the water utilities are so close to the property in question. Andrew, is that a fair assessment, if I may, Mr. Mayor?
Mayor Carter, it's really important with the sewer line. I was unaware that this was on a septic, and at the time, probably that sewer main that I said goes to and through that development was not there. Now that this property is within 300 feet of that sewer main, he's going to have to connect now to that sewer main to get off the septic. That's going to have to happen probably now, regardless of what council decides what to do with this development. But that situation probably cannot continue when you're when you are within 300 feet of a sewer main. Water, I would agree with Carter too. I mean, you don't really want a water next to sewer. I mean, for obvious reasons, even though our sewer mains, you know, we don't like them to leak, but occasionally they do. It would make sense for him to hook in to municipal water. So,
Councilman Kathy.
I've got about 3 different questions. First of all, what is his frontage there on Link Drive? Do you recall that?
I don't, Steve.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I was just curious what that footage was. But actually, it looks like the sewer was put in conjunction with our ordinance of the to and through. Now, the other question I was going to ask, and this would go to Andrew, is that actually he can stay on that sewer, and I'm sorry, on the septic until he fails. Isn't that, until the septic fails, isn't that correct? And then he is required to tie into the sewer?
Mayor, council, I'm not the health department. But the health department learns about these situations when they ask to re-permit a septic system.
Exactly.
And that is when they get caught.
Yes.
Oh, you're now within 300 feet, now you have to connect.
Yes.
So I won't say that's incorrect, but I'm saying that technically, they're now within 300 feet of a sewer main, they should be connecting.
I was thinking that was the rule from a couple of the CPU meetings. The other thing is, didn't we, and then the council approved at, was it either last month or a couple of months ago, that we only required a person to extend their water line to that second lot and didn't force them to go through it? If you remember that conversation.
Mayor, council, that was out on Wolf Creek Road. He wanted to run an individual water service to his lot, and he was told, no, you've got to extend the water main to your lot line to get water into that lot.
But we allowed him not to have to extend it through it.
Through the other lot.
Right.
Correct.
So we have allowed that within, well, since the first of the year. So we have done that. Now my question again, one more question, is would he be willing to go ahead and extend that water line, not just that 30 feet, but go ahead and extend it on up to Magnolia, which then puts it at that intersection, which then goes ahead and ties in with the expanded area and the global aspect of what you're talking about with the streets and things?
I can't speak for him because I don't know what the cost of that would be, Steve, but I mean, I think that's a reasonable request.
That's because that gets them up to that intersection then, and it helps break up that obligation too, because if that street went on through, instead of tying in at the T, he would then only be required to put in that one side. That's why I was asking what that frontage was.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
thank you for the comments. And as you know, I normally don't like to
Oh, sure.
give
I know.
variances, but yeah.
Thank you.
And just leave him in the county until that global area can come around.
Yeah, and you know, and that ought to be something you guys ought to be looking at doing sooner than later. But I realize it's a major, it's a major undertaking to do a limited assessment district, and there's a lot of properties involved in this.
Oh, yeah.
Councilman Nell.
Mr. Beamer, if I may, if you are correct, and by law, he has to tie into our sewer system, then he would be able to do that without any of these annexation upgrades that we're talking about. Isn't that true?
Mayor, Councilman, it's still a city sewer main. He would have to get permission to tie into the sewer main, and he would have the very same discussion he's having right now to tie into the water. Just
But if you're
because-
forcing him by law to tie into that sewer main,
But if
he
they're-
won't be on the hook for streetlights and sidewalks and streets. Is that not correct? That's what I'm asking.
Mayor, Council, he would also have to follow the provisions of the owner of that sewer main. He simply cannot, just because it's there, doesn't just have the right to go tie into it without your guys' rules on top of that.
So yeah, if his thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, what it's saying is that if his septic dies tomorrow, then he's kind of hamstrung between state law and county health and city ordinance, because he would be required to tie in.
If this property was not contiguous, not immediately adjacent to city limits, then there's a more flexibility, if you will, in the fact that he then would have to sign a commitment to annex and bring up the system to city standards at the time he becomes a contiguous or at the demand of city council, if that makes sense. But he is, as you know, contiguous to city limits.
City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Andrew, you quoted a number earlier of some 76,000 or whatever it was. What is that number inclusive of?
As I understand it, that was ECS's estimate to improve Link Drive at the city limits now to Magnolia, to that intersection.
And that included
That
water?
included extending water and bringing the street up to city standards.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I don't know if Mr. Hall and the owner would be amenable to this, and I'm not sure council would be comfortable with this either. So I'm offering this as a proposal of the possibility of extending to link these infrastructure elements, and feeling relatively satisfied that the merits of the ordinance have been met in that regard. 76,000 would be the exposure, of course, for Mr. Hall's client to make that happen, but at least it saves the owner the cost of improving Magnolia and running the water line through Magnolia to the end of that property line. But that's just an idea. I'm not even sure how council or Mr. Hall feels about that.
Let me ask you a real quick question, Andrew. So on Link and then Magnolia, why do we, I think I know the answer to it, but why do we make them run those lines? Instead of, if they could pull the line for water and sewer off of Link, why would we make them finish Magnolia?
Mayor, for the very simple purpose that we would also expect the street to be brought up to city standards. And if the next property owner down needed water, we don't want to dig up a brand new street in order to extend those utilities then to serve adjacent properties in the future. It may not be for 10 years or 20 years, but we don't want to go back and dig up existing infrastructure in order to make connections for future connection.
Okay, so I guess then the follow-up question to that then is, it would seem to me that if I own one of these other properties on the opposite side of Lincoln, the opposite side of Magnolia, I'm just gonna let him pay for everything, and then I'm gonna tap in for nothing. So, well, I guess that's my statement. I mean, it's like, we're asking them to brunt the cost of all of this, but other people would have little to no skin in the game if they want to tie into it, correct?
Mayor, Council, that is correct. I mean, it's unusual for, we can call this a development, but for development of this size to be so small and isolated, usually a developer has the adjoining properties, and it's, you know, you can more equitably spread those costs out. There are recapture provisions, I think, Wallace, if I'm not still mistaken, that he might be able to recapture some of those costs if somebody else wanted to tie in to some of these services, but those are
Unenforceable.
there you go.
They are
Difficult to enforce.
unenforceable.
So one last follow-up then on Link Drive itself, could we not just have them, being that they could pull off of that, could we not just, have we ever done it to where we just make them do one section of it?
Mayor, I think Curtis' suggestion was a good one, extending the utilities to Magnolia and bring the city streets up, that city street up to city standards. Then you still have the water and sewer available for future connection. It doesn't prevent the guy on the north side of Link Drive from that same scenario.
Right.
This is what I was gonna say.
Is that what you were gonna say?
Can I,
Could be a
there's just no way he can afford to pay $76,000 on his own. That's, when, you know, the value of the property is X number of dollars, he's got a mortgage. When you add this and don't require the adjacent, the benefiting property owner on the other side to participate in the cost, it's just an untenable amount of money for one party to pay. And besides that, if your policy is to and through, why make an exception just to extend it down to Magnolia? You still haven't fulfilled the to and through obligation of the ordinance. I'm simply asking, he's 30 feet from a water line. I'm just simply asking for you all to waive the requirement in this particular situation, which is in fact unique and can be solved by a private agreement between the city and this property owner. And he is willing to participate in any annexation in the future, would allow that to be recorded on his deed, so if he sells it, the future owners would be required to do that, as well as participating in any limited assessment district, which will require a vote of all the property owners in that area before you can actually implement a limited assessment district. You can't just go in and force everybody to participate, they all have to vote in favor. Is that correct? Am I correct on that?
We all have to.
Andrew?
Mayor, I mean, it's, you have to have the majority of property owners.
Majority, that's
By
right.
land area, 50% or more
Right.
have to agree to the local assessment district. So it's not just, hey, let's set up an LAD and you're forced to come in. It has to be 50% or more have to agree to it by land area of the assessment district.
Wallace?
I think it's important to note to council that the resolution that's in your packet, 2069, that was passed because we were trying to prevent a spider web of lines going everywhere. Right? From tying into the main, just having spider webs of individual lines going all over the place. But we knew when we passed it that we were going to have some unique situations. And so in section 3 of the ordinance, we built in, for good and substantial cause, the city manager may allow exceptions to the provisions that are required in the contract. So that there was some reasonableness built in. Now, as an attorney, that always makes me nervous because you want to treat everybody fairly, right, and the same. But we recognize that if you get rid of the spider webs, you're also going to have situations like this that kind of end up with a patently unfair result. So I just wanted you to be aware that in the resolution that the last council passed, you built in an exception for unique cases. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lutz.
Two questions. So if these properties are county, would we really be able to even talk about doing a local assessment district if they're not city-owned properties
Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman,
or city?
city limits.
Yeah, sorry,
That's
city
right.
limit properties.
That's exactly right. No, the LAD could not be developed, in my opinion, without 50% of the property owners, whether they're in the city limits or not,
Okay,
to participate.
okay.
Yeah. Another alternative, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Without a doubt, Mr. Hall would like for his client to not have any additional costs, which I understand.
No, that's not true, not any. I'm not trying to be unreasonable, not at all.
Well, let me finish. The offer that I would make, is not only would he be allowed to tie in where he's at, and admittedly a lateral would be a cost, but he's going to have that cost anyway.
Sure.
That's a sunk cost, right? If indeed we required him tying into the sewer system as well as a part of that, maybe that's a reasonable means as well as just identified in keeping with that resolution and fixing at least a couple problems with respect to the issues that exist out there. Because we do. It is a unique circumstance. It is an unusual situation, not necessarily anticipated by the ordinance, but at least we're keeping some of these issues for our future folks to deal with to a minimum. Maybe council could feel satisfied with that, and perhaps that would be something that the owner would feel comfortable.
I've already had that conversation with him, and I've anticipated that tapping into sewer would be a requirement. So we've already had that discussion, and frankly, if you're going to have city water and sewer's available, it makes sense to tap into it. So yes, and thank you.
All right, sorry, just a follow-up really quick, because obviously we also have this north piece of property that's, on this link drive as well. So I think ultimately, once again, I think to do something like that is fine, but I think we have to be very comfortable with the fact of basically we are going to have this north owner probably come back to us and say, I also want this, whatever weird lateral piece that comes up to my property as well. And I think it's only fair that we'd be expected to extend that equally.
I get where you're coming from on that, but I also, and we've had this discussion before, is that when we move away from doing what we do, you just hit it on the head as you allow one person to do it, and then the person across the road is going to want to do it, and then the next person that comes in and says, hey, back on this meeting, you let that person do it, so let me do it.
Yep.
That's the only thing I worry about. And we've seen that happen, obviously, in some developments, but Councilman McGinn.
Has anybody approached the people to the north to see if they're interested in water?
Yes, he has.
And?
No, they're not interested.
Okay.
Councilwoman Ingbridge.
So they're not interested in city water unless
I was not personally
unless
involved in
it's
that discussion,
free,
so
I'm
I
going
don't
to
know.
assume.
I'm only going by what I was told, and my understanding is these conversations took place a few years ago with that party, and there just wasn't any interest. And Jim's not that sophisticated to have gone to this step, so this was my idea to help him. So I hope that answered your question.
So I do have a follow-up for Andrew. So, because, human nature is human nature. Everybody wants everything for free. So, that's just the way it is. So if we take that water line and move it down Link, and then you have the people to the north who, right at the moment, are saying no because they don't want to incur any costs. But then now you've got the water line through there, so it's going to be at a significant less cost than what it's going to cost this gentleman. Do you know just a ballpark about what they would have to pay to bring that to their houses?
Mayor, Councilwoman, service lines, water service lines specifically, we want them to run perpendicular to the water main. So it all depends. I think I'm hearing the proposal is to extend that water main 40 or 50 feet, I think.
To the west.
To the west. So there'd be plenty of other opportunity for that property owner to also extend that water service perpendicular into his property. So he'd be looking at digging into a gravel street, essentially, because it won't be paved. There's no other infrastructure in there. He would have to lay, depending on what size of service he wants, a 3/4 inch or 1 inch would be typical. I don't know what that business is on the north. He would have to pay those costs as well as system investment charge. I would guess he would be on the hook for about $5,000 to $7,000 to make that happen.
A lot less than 76,000.
That's not including extending the water main.
Councilman Nell.
Thank you. I guess, after thinking more and looking more, I mean, we're talking 30 feet, but it's not just 30 feet. Because he's gonna have to come straight out, Andrew, probably what, 60 feet? And then, because he's got, that line has to run perpendicular, correct? We're not gonna let him come off that at an angle into his place. He's gotta run it down and then come over.
Mayor, Councilman, the water main will be extended 30 to 40 feet west.
Right.
And then we'll have to tap off that newly installed water main perpendicularly into his lot.
Right, well,
So-
like the mayor said earlier, I'm not into this piecing it and opening floodgates, but, I mean, this guy's 30 feet away, and I guess for me, if he'd be willing to put on that deed, that if the city so chooses, we get to annex this piece of property, and we end up with a taxable piece of ground, plus we have a new service customer. I guess if the people to the north of that, or further on down the line, want to extend it, then they could pay to continue on from there. Is that the way you see it?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm asking Andrew, is this, what I'm asking
Sorry, I
is,
thought you were looking at me.
what is your opinion of this? We haven't heard that yet.
Mayor, Councilman, if he came back to me, I'd be saying, congratulations, welcome to the city of Casper, extend the utilities to and through the development, and bring it all up to city standards, and he'll go, it's too extravagant, and we'd probably be, I'd go, let's come back to council then, because I'm not gonna make that call on your behalf. My direction would be, yeah, you're more than welcome to, but you now have to extend the utilities to and through your property.
But being that that's putting an unfair burden on that landowner, and there was a provision in this ordinance for situations like this, how do you personally feel about allowing them to extend that to 30 or 40 feet so that they can have water and sewer at that property, with the possibility of us being able to annex that piece?
Mayor, Councilman, if you wanted my, I think it would be reasonable to extend the water main to Magnolia. And I personally think it'd be, well, this is where I agree that all of a sudden the adjacent property owners are getting an unfair advantage, if you will, on the cost. But to me, the street really should be run up to city standards as well. Because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there's gonna be somebody in my position and the city manager going, how did this happen? Why do we have this legacy problem in our city? Why is this not paved, and why is there no curb and gutter, and why are there no sidewalks?
But on the same token, we're gonna force this guy, even if we're gonna force him to bring it up to city standards, and you're gonna have people that don't even live in the city beating the hell out of the street. They get the benefit of a city street, and they don't even live or pay taxes in the city.
Mayor, Councilman, that's true for anybody that lives in the county and drives into our city limits to shop or dine or do whatever. So I don't disagree, but
But one of the things you said earlier on the same token was you didn't want to go back. You didn't want them to have to go back and dig up a street that was brought up to city standard, excuse me. But if we allow them to extend this the 30 feet that he needs and then put an elbow on it so he can have water, it wouldn't hurt later on to extend out of there because it's a dirt road.
Mayor, Council, if you're not gonna pave it, you're right. If you're not gonna pave and bring it up to city standards, then extending it 30 to 40 feet and tapping a service line into it is probably okay.
Andrew, if I can ask you a question on this. So, this guy right here on the north side, you have water and sewer that runs to this point, so obviously to the end of the road here. Could he tap into either one of those right now without having to extend any of this through?
Mayor, Councilman, he could tap into sewer, because that runs all the way through. If this property line is indeed right here, he probably could tap into water, but currently he's not inside the city limits. So he would have to come, we would have the same discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to now annex, And you probably, we'll be having a very similar discussion about extending the water to and through his development. Because
I know we'll have
because he
that.
is contiguous.
Okay, I got you. All right.
Good.
Councilman Kess.
Well, to put another fly in the ointment, okay?
I've never heard that one.
If you go and do what?
I've never heard that one.
Oh, you have?
Like young
Generational
summer
thing.
child.
Summer child.
Yes, Jiminy, Chris, right? We have allowed exceptions to the city standard business for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I think the house you are selling is not on an up to code, what Andrew is talking about as far as city streets are concerned. Because you don't have curb and gutter.
My personal house?
Yeah.
I got curb and gutter.
There's part
Up
of,
above it, the upper loop does not. You're
that's,
correct.
okay. You
But I
live,
do.
okay, I thought you lived on the
We're
outer
on
part
record
of it.
saying.
Sorry about that. I thought you lived on that outer
No.
loop. That's my error in where I thought you lived. I'll tell the kids to back off with the toilet paper. I'll tell the kids to back off on the toilet paper.
No, it ain't my house, so.
But anyhow, that's the outer part of Morado, which is in the city limits and was annexed in, and everything else does not have curb and gutter on it. And as a matter of fact, I think the curb and gutter stops where the stake center is. If I remember right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they had to put it in, put
Yeah.
the church in, but.
Yeah, but that's where it ends, is at the edge of that property right there. So, again, we have granted exceptions when subdivisions have been put in.
Does it make this suggestion?
Mr. Mayor, council, you want me to, okay, so the proposition that I think council ought to adhere to, if indeed you don't believe that link should be extended or developed or whatever, would be this. Go ahead and require the property to annex now, have them tap into sewer, have them tap into water, and have them sign on to a precondition, if you will, of agreeing to an LAD if one should ever come to pass as a condition of the deed. And that would basically be the four elements of the agreement, if you will, a private agreement between Mr. Hall's client and access to the utilities of the city.
I believe that was what was in the ordinance that's written here, isn't it?
Mr. Mayor, the ordinance would require that utilities be extended and to and through, as well as the street. What I'm suggesting is extend the water to the extent that he can gain access to it pursuant to his property line. Allow him to tap into it from there. That doesn't create an opportunity for any neighbors because they can already tap into it pursuant to a city agreement to do so. Have them tap into the sewer right now. So we're having them tap into two things, water and sewer. Annex now and incur those costs of annexation. And then sign to an LED agreement should one ever come to pass in that area. That's basically the
I think that would be acceptable.
Who pays for the costs of all this? They do.
client.
I like it.
Ray pays for it all.
I'll take care of it.
I got your record now. Anybody have any comments or discussion on that? We okay in doing that?
I think we have to be, amenable to our people. I think it's a great idea.
Takes the fly out of the ointment.
It also clears up that city property line right there by bringing that one piece in.
Well, that's nice. The nicer.
Fixes that, yeah.
I think it fits into the reasonableness.
If we could.
All right, so you're good moving forward, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, okay? We're good?
I really appreciate it. Thank you all. On behalf of Mr. Broussard, thank you, and thank you for your time today. You guys do a great job, by the way, so, and I'm not just saying that. Sean, good to see you.
Me too.
Thanks, Bruce. See you, Steve. Steve? Chris, would you call me when you get a chance?
I will, yeah. Okay, we'll move on to agenda review, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Looking at your agenda document, sorry for just a second. For the first meeting in June, one of the major items that we're going to be trying to prepare you for is the Fifth Amendment for the current year's budget, which has the effect of helping us tie out the activity of FY21. Nothing really to do with the character of the budget we just presented you this past week, which would be FY22. Let's see. The resolution of support for the 6-cent tax would be ostensibly, and I know it says tentative there, but we're really shooting for that resolution to come forward for your formal consideration, which in conjunction with the other communities would then be forwarded to the county for their, their final adoption of this possibility. Moving on from the meeting of the 1st, you can see we have some items already kind of queued up for June 8th. A number of these items are items that are coming forward by virtue of, for example, the health department's proposal for fees that they want to pass. And the International Building Code discussion would be, again, our exercise necessary to be commensurate with the state's adoption of the same. Contractor licensing would be a follow-up item pursuant to Councilman Johnson's request along these lines. And the amendment to the fiscal year 21 budget would be that Fifth Amendment that I just identified to you. And beyond that, Mr. Mayor, that is all I have. The DEA item that has been kind of popular with some of you is on the 22nd of June, which would be that grant issue that you wanted further discussion about. And that would be all that I would bring up at this point, unless there's other questions.
Councilman Cathy.
I had a question about the one-way, two-way conversion study.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, that is a study that has been brought to the MPO committee, and the MPO committee has found transportation dollars to take care of that kind of a discussion. And so that would be a recommendation of your MPO group to consider an analysis of the of Durban and Walcott that are impacted by that configuration currently. And so that essentially is what that would be, a study along those lines.
And I guess, why has MPO brought it up? Or is this something that I should be asking at the council meeting? Because I'm trying to get some further background, because it's been that way for 30 years, and I'm just looking at the mess that will create and some of the intersections that would have to be redone and things along those lines to accomplish this, which I don't necessarily see us tearing out the island there at Midwest and Durban, because that would have to come out, and lights would all have to be reprogrammed, and I don't see where we necessarily have the money to accommodate anything at this point, even if we did it. So why would we spend $40,000 on something that we probably or possibly wouldn't be able to fund and accomplish anyhow?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we could certainly prepare that conversation for the pre-meeting of that evening, in that we don't really have anything scheduled at this point. And so I think that'd be a pretty worthy conversation. To answer your question, probably inadequately and directly, if I would, is to say, likely what happened is the MPO committee had citizens come forward and say, hey, we'd like you to take this up and do this analysis since it hasn't been done in a while. And the MPO committee is responding to that particular request, is my guess.
And hasn't there been an analysis done sometime in the last 10 or 15 years of that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I would say probably in the last 20, but because it happened prior to my being here when I was an employee a while back. So I'd probably say more along the lines of 20-some years ago. Yeah.
Councilmember Pollock.
Sit on that committee, so I can give a little bit of insight maybe, but I think that the study would seek to answer exactly all the questions you just asked. Is it feasible? Is it going to cause a lot of impact? Like what are the pros and cons of doing this? And I do think it did come from expressed concern to the MPO as to why they're investigating it. And I would also just add that there are a number of studies that the MPO conducts that ultimately we don't have enough money to actually attain those things now, but it gives us information for planning for the future. So this is more, MPO deals with very long-term planning, and so this is just, a piece of data that I think is interesting to the MPO right now. But yeah, certainly be happy to see it come up for discussion at a pre-meeting to get more detail. But it's one of maybe about 5 or 6 MPO projects that we've discussed since I've been on the committee.
Councilwoman Ingrid.
I won't be here for the 8th meeting, but could I request to get the 2021 International Building Code sooner than later?
Gotcha.
You're gonna read through all 2,523 pages?
Maybe.
That's scary.
Okay, anything further on?
Could I interrupt you with the
Yeah.
International Building Code? That's not the easiest thing to get your hands on, other than visiting the office. Last time I looked at just like the International Fire Code, it was $400 or $500. We have them, or we'll have them at the city. Would it be advisable to come look at it or borrow it or whatever if you want your own copy?
I can come and look at it. Because I know that the council previously last year, about this time, passed part 1 of this. So I would like to see what part 2 and 3 looks like.
All right, anything else on agenda review? Okay, legislative review.
I have nothing on that matter, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Counselor around the table. Member Pollock.
I guess I would draw attention to, it's not happening this week, but next week is the first art walk of the season, back again after hiatus last year. So take a look at the schedule. It's coming up. Lots of great things to check out. And I guess in the art world as well, Art 321 hosted a health and wellness conference this last week that I was honored to serve on a panel for, and it was attended by folks from all over the state, and they had speakers from out of state as well. I think they're doing some pretty incredible work over there, so definitely keep an eye on what they have going on through the summer. Lots more to come in the arts through the summer months. So I think that's all that I have. And I couldn't attend my OYD meeting yesterday, so I don't have an update for you, but maybe the mayor does. Great.
Councilwoman Lutz.
Nothing tonight.
Councilman Casper.
If I understood it right, our CPU meeting in the morning has been canceled?
That's correct.
Okay. So, nothing.
Councilman Nell.
Most of our high school seniors statewide have graduated, so congratulations to them as they look forward to their futures and whatever their endeavors will be. And lastly, I forgot last week, but I wanted to give a shout out to Pete Maxwell down at the Gaslight. He is putting on some and bringing in some pretty fantastic concerts for the summer. So there'll be a huge summer concert series, everything from country music to, I think they even have 38 Special coming. And that's on an outdoor stage. So the first outdoor concert of the year will be available June 3rd down at the old Stock Ups lot, and they're bringing Easton Corbin into town, who is just incredible. So good for Pete for doing those kind of things. I think as long as the community's supporting them and buying tickets and going to them, he'll be able to continue to do that, because I know those are very expensive endeavors. And so anyway, people have been itching to get out and do some things. So between him and the Wyoming Ford Center, which is getting quite booked with a tremendous amount of acts, and they're doing an outdoor concert on July 2nd, I know. CNFR starts June 13th. So a lot of exciting things going on, so get out and partake and join your community, and let's get rid of COVID and just go have a good year. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ingbridge.
Lemonade Day is coming up, so I just kind of like to encourage everybody to go register. I believe tomorrow is the kickoff, and then they can get their backpacks on Thursday, so they can register. And I personally love Lemonade Day. I'm an entrepreneur, and I did lemonade stands when I was little, and so, you know, I'm all for it. So I love driving around and giving the kids some money. And then for the senior center, they are having an event. It's going to be held on June 26th from 5 to 9, and it is going to be called Night at the Races fundraiser. They have 18 horses. I believe they still have about 10 left. You can buy a horse for $100, and then you can attend the event for $35 a piece. So if you guys are available or anything, I encourage you to check it out.
Councilman Johnson.
Nothing tonight.
Councilman Gamron.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things. Pathways Innovation Center had their open house last Friday night. Went to that, was really cool. Dozens of kids graduated there with ServSafe certifications, CNAs, welding certifications, heavy equipment operators, forklift operation certificates. So really cool work being done up at Pathways. Those kids graduating, getting straight into well-paying jobs in career and technical education. Superintendent Jillian Baylor was there, and so went really well. It was a great evening. Attended the CHA board meeting last week. The plans of the Liberty Square project, they're coming together, and they expect breaking ground of that in July. As a reminder, that's over there, Beverly and 12th Street area behind the fire department. And also we approved their budget, which has nearly doubled in the past year, 8 years since Kim became the executive director. So that speaks to her ability to source federal grants and create successful needed projects in our community. So just wanted to give props to Kim Summerall Wright at the Casper Housing Authority. Earlier today, Chamber of Commerce held a Congressional Roundtable, and Representative Liz Cheney was there. So wanted to thank Jason DeWitt and his team at the Chamber for putting that on, and then also Representative Cheney for showing up. And then the only other thing I have is doing a little bit of a Facebook Live event tomorrow evening. So if you have questions or would like a layman's interpretation of what we're talking about budget-wise, feel free to tune in from 7 to 7:30 on my Facebook page.
I have lots of questions.
Yeah,
I'm showing up.
I'll be there. Page numbers and references.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, what's flying the ointment?
Or young summer child. I'm
Like
interested in
summer
that.
child. What's a summer child?
Vice Mayor Pacheco.
Thank you. The only thing I had is that I sat on a panel at the same at Art 321 on Friday. I think you were Saturday. Yes. Friday afternoon, it was on youth health crisis and how art can play into that. So it was great. Art 321, they're doing some fantastic stuff, and I look forward to seeing what they have for the future. And their executive director, who's probably within the last year he's been here, you would say? I've been with, yeah, just doing a fantastic job up there. So it was really good just to talk about youth health crisis, especially with stuff coming in with the pandemic and things coming out of that, but also just youth recidivism, kids coming out of residential treatment, dealing with those types of stuff, and how we reach young people and how we work with them, dealing with that type of stuff. So it was kind of a cool thing. So anyway, enjoy it. That's all I got, Mayor.
All right. I attended the OID meeting yesterday. The Goodstein lot, which is a lot they're redoing over here right now, we voted on that to be named the Old Yellowstone District parking lot. So, and that lot's mainly for the downtown area, because I think the new state building has 400 or some parking spots over there, so it's not a state parking lot, it's a lot for downtown. So that was pretty much highlighted at the OID meeting, and attended the Boys and Girls Club event this weekend. Over $703,000 raised in one night. So, and I get to meet Terrell Davis. So there's that. So, that was it. So, all right, Councilman Casper.
A question about that OID parking lot. I noticed a sign down there right now that says overnight parking. Is that just going to be during construction, or will that be permanent?
So that's a discussion that we had. Did you want to say something about it, Chief?
That's not been for construction only, that's been there for a while.
Yeah. So the question came up from some business owners down there that about overnight parking, and there's a concern about, there's a difference between overnight camping
Yes.
and overnight parking. And the overnight parking, so I'm not really sure what your question is, but I do know that they support overnight parking down there. Business owners do, because some of them do not want, they feel that if they don't support overnight parking, then you're supporting people getting intoxicated and driving home.
That was why I was asking that question specifically, because you drive by, like, I don't get down here that much, but you drive by Kagan Cork on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and there are anywhere from 2 to 10 cars there that you know have been left there just exactly for that reason, to avoid the DUIs and things. And so that was why I was asking that, and I didn't know along those lines, because we don't want overnight camping there.
Right.
They can go to Walmart parking lot for that. But I didn't know if there would be a way then that if somebody went to one of those establishment owners and say, hey, I need you to call me an Uber, I want to leave my car here, if they could get a chit or a sticker or whatever to go out there, throw on their dashboard that says allowed DUI abatement, and have a date, and basically if it's still there 48 hours later, it goes to impound. But I didn't know if something along those lines could happen, to be able to allow what you're looking for not camping there, but also allow for the DUI abatement. But that's something to think about, discuss. But I happened to notice that sign when I went by today.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think we have the flexibility to manage that site however you'd like, as it relates to the ordinances anyway. So if there is a different sort of stipulation that you'd like to see there, we could certainly sign it accordingly and deal with it from that standpoint.
No.
What does it say
Thereafter.
now?
Do what?
What does it say right now?
No overnight parking.
Can't we just change it to overnight camping? People could still park there,
Well-
you're not camping.
Is this the one across
Or just
from
take the
Rocca's
sign
and you guys
Yeah.
like to move the sign? Just take the sign.
That's the one you're talking about. But I hadn't
That
realized.
seems like an easy fix, no overnight
Well,
camping.
Yeah.
We already have camping ordinances in place.
The only, I guess,
Just take the sign out.
if we stuck to that specific lot, I think that would be a good discussion. I used to live downtown, and I think at least why no overnight parking in general came about was because, you know, Wyoming National Apartments are down there and a lot of other residential properties, and there was issues of folks leaving their cars street side over the course of the weekend, and when you're wanting to go to Eggington's for breakfast in the morning, the street's lined with people that just leave their cars there, and so that's why it was probably in place. But Goodstein lot, I think, would be maybe an area where we could discuss some different conditions.
And that was kind of why I threw out if there would be a way for bars to give out something to put in there so that you knew that it was tonight, I'll come back and pick it up in the morning type deal. But
Well,
that's something to think
unless I'm on a
about.
binger, bro.
Do what?
Might need 2 months.
The whole week.
Well, there's
We're not-
enough parking spots
we're not all
down there, we
lightweights,
could just
Kathy.
pull the sign out and be okay with it. I don't
Didn't
think
this,
we're
wasn't necessarily saying I was a lightweight. If I'm gonna do that, I'll go the more.
That'd be pretty
saying.
Right.
300
gonna be next to the night
Put a
at 300
couple flies
cars,
in
they had to
there.
stay overnight.
Yeah, the fly wouldn't be with where I'm parking, the fly would be wherever you home.
I was being facetious, bro.
Oh, I know. That was back when I was in the military.
Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you.
Yes, everybody.
I was in the military, you could get a transfer